It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm former Assembly Speaker Scott Jensen.
And I'm former Senate Majority Leader Chuck Chvala.
And we're the Insiders. This week we're talking about the race for Superintendent of Public Instruction in Wisconsin. Last time we talked about it, Chuck, you seemed to think Jeff Wright had a chance to make it into the runoffs, but the voters thought differently. They ended up with the incumbent, Jill Underly, and with challenger Brittany Kinzer, an education consultant and school leader from the Milwaukee area. So how do you think it's shaping up for the general election?
Well, first of all, I thought Jeff Wright did a pretty good job coming out of nowhere. Basically, Kinzer was going to be the vote for conservatives. So it's a matter of splitting up the moderate and progressive vote. And frankly, he did quite well for a guy who really had very little money to spend. He articulated his program, I thought, quite well in the various appearances that he made, whether in front of WisPolitics or with, I even saw some TV interviews that he did, as well as in some of the newspapers around the state. But it is very hard to win a race like this against an incumbent in any turnout, but especially in a spring turnout election. So I think he did well. But at the end of the day, Underly made it. There's two ways to look at this. One is, and I think this is the right way. The right way is if you combine her votes and his votes, Wright and Underly, who were both pretty much the public school people, they overwhelmingly beat Kinzer. Now, for the general election, there will be a much higher turnout, although probably only about double what turned out in the primary, because it is a low turnout spring election. And in those elections, generally, progressives have been doing better, it seems, over time. Now, the other way to look at it is, hey, Kinzer is the person who did quite well, surprisingly well. And if you look at the Jeff Wright vote, that's a vote against Underly, and therefore she should be looking at getting votes. That is, I think, a flawed analysis, because I do think that the bottom line is, even though there are certainly going to be detriments, I think, there will be a lot of negative campaigning out there about Kinzer's lack of administrative experience, no license in the state of Wisconsin to teach or be an administrator or anything. And there's going to be certainly some stuff brought up about Underly. I think at the end of the day, this is going to be basically public schools versus voucher schools. And I don't think voucher schools are in the ascendancy right now. That's my take.
Wow.
So that means I expect Underly to win.
You had it right on the second one, Chuck. When there's a three-way race and one of the people is the incumbent, and the incumbent walks away with 38% of the vote, that is a major problem. You've been in races where if an incumbent comes out of a primary and they got less than 50% of the vote or less than 40% of the vote, that means that most people chose someone other than the incumbent. That is a huge problem for an incumbent. Now, I think you're right that the general election will have 4 times, maybe 3 to 4 times as many people voting as we're voting in this February primary. It won't be as cold as it was on Tuesday. And so there'll be a bigger turnout. There'll be a lot of people who weren't paying attention, lots of new voters engaged that we're going to have to talk to. Both candidates are going to have to talk to during the course of the next few weeks. But I think that Underly is facing serious trouble. I mean, she's getting hit. She got hit by not only by Wright and Kinzer, but by Governor Evers for lowering the academic standards in Wisconsin, Governor Evers' academic standards. She's having budget troubles at her agency. They're having layoffs there. People are leaving the ship that she's on. She got hit in the MPS audit that Governor Evers asked for, and that said that the agency had failed to disclose, as it should have, the financial troubles that were at MPS for much sooner than that. She's got a record of, she's for boys and girls sports. She's on video saying pronouns save lives. I think she is way out of step with where the voters are here. And that Kinzer's the one who actually has a message that's going to resonate with people. And let's raise academic standards. Let's forget all this other crap and focus on reading, writing, and math and making sure kids are prepared to go to college or to get a great job. And that message cuts across all boundaries. Looked at the victory party that Kinzer had It was like a Star Wars bar scene. I mean, there's all these African American parents there, and then there was, right-wing Republicans there, and then there was school leaders there. It was like, how did all these people end up in the same room? Well, it's because she has a common sense message, and unfortunately, Underly is going to be negative the whole way home. She's not going to talk about her agenda at all. She's going to try to take Kinzer apart. Again, another sign that an incumbent's in trouble.
I think that the difficulty with Scott's analysis is that, as we've talked about so many times in this program, we have become so tribal now in these elections. And I think the tribal element here is that the spring election is going to be dominated by the Supreme Court race. The reality is that the superintendent of public instruction has really little to say about policy. In fact, how we are going to set these standards that are going to be talked about that Underly had some impact on. There's actually legislation right now to say this will be different according to the legislature. So the reality is here, I think what ends up happening is because this race in the spring will be dominated by the Supreme Court, the superintendent's race will be a secondary thought. But I think what people will get out of this, I think that Crawford will win over Schimmel. And I think that balance will probably carry through the superintendent's race, because it will be a question, as it has been so much over the last 10 years, 8 years, which side are you on? And right now, people are on the side, I believe, of public education. I think that people are concerned about what's happening in DC. I think Crawford wins, and I think if Crawford wins, and I think she will, I think Underly will win as well. It will not be so much a race about the superintendent's race as it will be about just where we are tribally. Now, the good news for Kinzer is that it's only 2 races. I mean, there may be some local aldermanic race and all, but frankly, the only statewide races are these 2. In fact, even large regional races, these are the only 2. But still, I think you're going to end up back with tribal politics in a spring election, which is now trending more toward the Democratic side. And I think that will carry the day. But we will find out, and there are certainly good arguments to be made on both sides.
Well, I think you're right to say that the Supreme Court race is going to shape the turnout of the electorate on April 1. That's where $75 million or something is going to get spent. A lot of it will get spent on turnout, and that will shape the electorate that will be there on April 1. And Kinzer's hope, I think, is to not get pegged as the superintendent is trying to peg her as a Republican, which is a funny thing for someone who's a lifelong Democrat. But anyways,
oh, hold on. Didn't she have all these right-wing Republicans there with the African Americans at her event? I thought those people were maybe an indication.
Yeah, all those people were rallying around the agenda that she has that I think resonates very well with people, which is restore Wisconsin's high academic standards, and let's focus on the basics so kids can have the skills they need to graduate from school and get a good job or go on to college. And I think that message cuts across all the lines. So the question, can she break out of that? And therefore the turnout matters less to her, the shape of the turnout in April. But this is one I'm willing to bet on, Chuck. So between now and the election, let's think about what that bet is, because I'm convinced Kinzer's going to win this one.
Of course, it's illegal to bet in Wisconsin. We would never violate the law.
Well, it's not.
See you next time, folks.
Yeah.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.